From the murder of Tupac Shakur, shown to a local grand jury, that panel indicting 60-year-old Duane.
That he will be convicted of first-degree murder, and that allows us to ask for a no bail settlement.
When niggas come against me, I'ma knock they punk ass out.
If he didn't have anybody to fight, he'll find somebody to fight.
The man accused of plotting Tupac Shakur's 1996 murder made his first court appearance.
Hey, Keith, Metro Police, come over here. Hey, Metro Police, come over here, all right? Thanks, buddy.
We on Venice Beach. That's what you're supposed to do. I've been in jail for 11 months, Savage. You got to let me get a look or something.
In the adrenalized aftermath of a Mike Tyson prize fight in 1996, a black BMW carrying the rapper Tupac Shakur pulled up to a red light just off the Las Vegas Strip, thrilling the women in the car next to him. As Mr. Shakur hung out of his passenger side window, his friends in the Lexus behind him assumed that he was inviting the women to his record label's new night spot, Club 662, its numeric name a barely disguised telephone code for Mob. The women pulled away, and a white Cadillac took their place. A large muscular arm emerged from its rear window and fired a barrage of shots from a .40 caliber Glock pistol into the BMW. Mr. Shakur was hit 4 times. The driver of the BMW, the Death Row Records impresario Marion Knight, better known as Suge, was grazed by the gunfire. But he managed to take off, making a U-turn over a traffic median and driving the wounded Mr. Shakur in the opposite direction before pulling over. Malcolm Greenidge, a rapper and close friend of Mr. Shakur's who had been following them in the Lexus, rushed out of the car to check on Mr. Shakur. He testified this summer to a Las Vegas grand jury. Mr. Shakur seemed less concerned with his wounds than with Greenidge's safety. As armed police officers approached the chaotic scene, he recalled, "Get on the ground, they're going to shoot you," Mr. Shakur told him. Mr. Greenidge testified. Mr. Shakur would die less than a week later at 25. In the 27 years since, accounts of what happened on September 7, 1996 have existed in an unwieldy tangle of news reports, true crime specials, street gossip, internet innuendo, and dubious self-mythologizing. The case went cold. But with last week's indictment of Duane Keith Davis, a former Compton gang leader known as Keffe D, who has been saying publicly for years that he was in the white Cadillac when the fatal shots were fired, prosecutors have begun to map out the most detailed narrative yet of the chain of events they say led to Mr. Shakur's tragic demise, one that will be tested in court. While the broad outlines of Tupac's slaying and its possible motive have long been known, hundreds of pages of grand jury witness testimony given under oath and with surprisingly vivid descriptions for a decades-old case, as reviewed, offer new details of how hyperlocal disputes between warring gang factions had spilled into an ultimately fatal rap beef that would alter the course of hip-hop history. The son of Black Panther parents and a one-time performing arts student turned hip-hop backup dancer, Tupac had broken out as a solo artist in the early 1990s, with a unique blend of introspective street poetry and young man's fury.
When niggas come against me, I'ma knock they punk ass out.
If he didn't have anybody to fight, he'll find somebody to fight.
Kill this whole new vibe everybody want to be on about it being a war between the East Coast and the West Coast.
Right. So some of y'all black folks don't appreciate what we talking about, but this is the only way we got to make money.
We on Venice Beach. That's what you're supposed to do. I've been in jail for 11 months, Savage. You got to let me get a look or something.
It's important that I just put myself 100%, apply myself, and represent.
A proud anti-hero whose popularity only grew as he became mired in violence and rivalries, he transformed in demise into a hip-hop icon and pop culture martyr. Mr. Davis made his first appearance in Clark County District Court for a scheduled arraignment, which the judge postponed because Mr. Davis did not have a lawyer present, saying that his longtime California-based lawyer, E.D. Fall, could not be there. In a brief phone interview, Mr. Fall said Mr. Davis intended to plead not guilty. He declined to discuss specifics about the case, saying he was in the process of getting Mr. Davis a Nevada lawyer. Some of the new evidence challenges the conventional wisdom that had formed around the incident. While Mr. Davis had previously told law enforcement officials that the gun had been fired by his nephew, Orlando Anderson, who was slayed in a gang-related shooting in 1998, 2 witnesses shared accounts with the grand jury casting doubt on the widely believed narrative. Those close to the case have reacted to news of Mr. Davis's arrest with a mixture of shock and relief. Now someone had been indicted in his demise, and Greg Kading, a retired Los Angeles police detective who began to reinvestigate the slaying in 2006, said, "Tupac Shakur's slaying will never again go down as an unsolved mystery." Brawls and retaliation. Tupac's music and public persona had taken on a darker edge following his 1993 arrest and subsequent conviction for physical hurt, as he aligned himself with the gangster rap label Death Row Records and its leader Suge Knight, who orchestrated his $1.4 million bond pending appeal. While still awaiting the verdict in the case, Tupac had been ambushed, robbed, and shot in the lobby of a Manhattan recording studio, an attack he later blamed on his former friend, the Notorious B.I.G., and affiliates of the New York-based label Bad Boy Records, including Sean Combs, known then as Puff Daddy. After Tupac responded with a furious personal diss, Hit 'Em Up, in June 1996, what was once a simmering competition between the hip-hop vanguard on the East and West coasts became a boiling feud, with each side relying on support from sworn enemies in the gang underworld for protection and street credibility. There, the group of young Crips collided with a Death Row-affiliated group of Mob Piru Bloods, their nearby rivals, resulting in a struggle over a Death Row chain. "That's like taking somebody's crown," Mr. Lee testified. "It means something." Within 24 hours, he added, a war had broken out locally. In a scuffle that was captured by security cameras at about 9 p.m. that night, the group began to punch and kick Mr. Anderson, who declined to cooperate with the police and hotel security after his assailants scattered. Now, it was Mr. Anderson who was looking to exact revenge. He wasn't coming back to Compton with nothing being done, Lee told the grand jury. A fatal encounter. Mr. Davis, a successful drug dealer and shot caller for the Crips at the time of Tupac's demise, wrote in a 2019 memoir, Com Street Legend, that on the night of the shooting he obtained a Glock pistol from a drug associate from Harlem before setting out with Mr. Anderson to find Tupac and Suge.
From the murder of Tupac Shakur, shown to a local grand jury, that panel indicting 60-year-old Duane.
The man accused of plotting Tupac Shakur's 1996 murder made his first court appearance
in the assassination of a celebrity on a crowded street outside of a party with hundreds of witnesses.
Leading coverage in this historic arrest every step of the way, and tonight our David Sharns with the photos and videos you haven't seen.
That he will be convicted of first-degree murder, and that allows us to ask for a no-bail settlement.
Following a failed stakeout targeting Tupac and Suge at Club 662, the white Cadillac that Mr. Davis and Mr. Anderson were riding in came upon Tupac's BMW by chance, spotting him as he leaned out from the passenger side. According to witness testimony and law enforcement accounts, Terrence Brown was driving the white Cadillac that night. Mr. Davis rode in the front passenger seat with Mr. Anderson behind him, and DeAndre Smith, known as Big Dre, also sitting in the back. In describing the shooting, Mr. Davis wrote in his memoir that he had tossed the Glock into the back seat before the encounter at the traffic light. While he has sometimes refused to say who fired the shots that night, he told law enforcement officials in interviews about 15 years ago that it had been Mr. Anderson. But new testimony in the case suggests a different version of events. Mr. Lee, the grand jury witness, was Mr. Smith's roommate at the time and told the court in July that Mr. Smith had admitted at the time that he fired the shots that took the life of Tupac and injured Suge. In the aftermath, however, speculation spread in Compton, and beyond that, Mr. Anderson had pulled the trigger as retribution for his beating at the MGM. Mr. Smith let Mr. Anderson have the glory. Mr. Lee testified he didn't want to take credit for Orlando. Mr. Anderson, his friend said, often stopped short of claiming the slaying. "You all crazy man don't believe everything you hear," Mr. Lee recalled him saying, sharing his story. Immediately after the slaying, as a related gang war broke out in Compton, the police there arranged what Robert Ladd, a former Compton Police Department detective, described to the grand jury as a massive multi-gang search warrant, arresting known gang members to try to reduce the violence in the streets and searching the homes of Mr. Davis and the others from the white Cadillac. But the initial investigation stalled, with the police blaming a lack of cooperation from witnesses. It was revived in 2006 when the Los Angeles Police Department opened a task force into the still unsolved 1997 slaying of the Notorious B.I.G. in a shooting long thought to be related to Tupac's demise. It was during that inquiry that Mr. Kading, the Los Angeles police detective, persuaded Mr. Davis to speak with him after dangling the threat of a drug trafficking prosecution. In 2008, Mr. Davis agreed to what is called a proffer agreement, in which Mr. Kading promised to not prosecute Mr. Davis using what he told him about Tupac and Biggie, so long as nothing he said proved to be a lie.
Hey Keith, Metro Police, come over here. Hey Metro Police, come over here, all right? Thanks, buddy.
Here is video showing Duane Keffe D. Davis in that courtroom at 8:30 this morning.
You said Tupac tried to jump in the back seat. It looked like he was reaching.
Mr. Davis is being held on no bail. That no bail status will continue.
I'm a man, understand through it all, dog. Whatever the lawyer got to offer me, I'm gonna come through it, you know what I'm saying?
Mr. Kading taped Mr. Davis's interview, and after retiring from the police department, the detective used the contents of the confession in a 2011 book called Murder Rap, the untold story of the Biggie Smalls and Tupac Shakur murder investigations. In 2015, the recording was included in a documentary based on the book. Mr. Davis was irritated by Mr. Kading's disclosures. Eager to share his story after recovering from colon cancer, he began talking publicly about the case. It was a risky step. Although Mr. Davis, who has spent a quarter of his life in prison partly on drug trafficking charges, would have been protected from prosecution for what he told Mr. Kading during their meeting, his later public disclosures were not protected, legal experts said. Mr. Davis gave his first public interview on the subject of Tupac's demise for a 2018 docuseries called Death Row Chronicles. He was trying to word things careful enough to walk a tightrope between taking credit but not getting arrested, said Mike Dorsey, the director of Murder Rap, who consulted on Death Row Chronicles. He said Mr. Davis arrived with a lawyer. After the series aired without leading to charges, Mr. Davis wrote about the case in his memoir. His interviews on the subject, including with prominent YouTubers, grew looser and looser, Mr. Dorsey said. Police officials and prosecutors in Las Vegas were watching Mr. Davis's interviews closely. Since 2019, he has appeared at least 8 separate times in promotion of this book and repeated various versions of these events, all of which he acknowledges that he is in fact the person that ordered the slaying of Mr. Shakur, Mark DiGiacomo, a prosecutor on the case, said in court. In his memoir, Mr. Davis at times softened toward Mr. Shakur and his family, writing that he had a deep sense of remorse for the pain his demise caused. Still, he held firm that revenge was necessary for the beating of his nephew, going as far as to say that for some of the Crips involved, the slaying earned them some stripes. But it generated too much attention, Mr. Davis went on, and put us under a microscope by law enforcement that would not cease and eventually brought us down. It was a big-time loss for everybody involved. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.